Pablo, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? How you been, Pablo? Tor, good to see you as well. Evening, how you doing? How you been? Adi, good evening as well. Good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? Okay. By the time everyone tunes in, we'll go through the disclaimer, intro, and what we're going to be talking about on tonight's live. A few things are happening around the world that everybody should be aware of. Some of them regarding tariffs, some of them regarding geopolitical tensions, and some regarding tokenization. New, essentially, information has come out regarding what companies hold when it comes to cryptocurrencies, which companies are joining the crypto bandwagon, as we're going to talk about tonight's live as well. Sorry about that. So, good evening, Manny. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Welcome to the CMF live show if you're watching this for the first time ever. The CMF stands for Crypto Miles Family, and my name is Miles. I host this live that you're watching. You can tune to this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards, where I share the most recent news essentially regarding cryptocurrency, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. Pretty much everything you need to know about regarding this world completely transforming into a digital space. The disclaimer of this live, as always, is not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. We also do Q&As on this live as well, which means if you do have any questions or any statements to make, put it down in the comment section. More than happy to help you out. Now, on tonight's live, we're going to be talking about Trump's and essentially his new tariff policies that are happening. We're also going to go through some BlackRock news on tonight's live. We're going to be talking about Hong Kong regarding their stablecoin regulations. We're also going to go through news regarding a US senator that's going after El Salvador in a very weird way. We're also going to go through news on tonight's live regarding Donald Trump and essentially once again gunning for the resignation of the Fed chairman. I'm going to go through essentially news regarding Japan on how they handled their situation regarding tariffs with Washington. It wasn't great. We're also going to go through news on tonight's live regarding Reserve One, a company that's trying to launch essentially Bitcoin-dominated digital asset reserves. And we're going to go through news on tonight's live regarding Tether and their holdings, Ripple news, and some other essentially news regarding what's happening inside the crypto space around the world. Now, the first news we're going to cover on tonight's live is regarding Trump and his new tariff policies. Now, before we do go through the first news, let's go inside the comment section first, and then we'll go straight into the first news. And the comment section is Cali. Good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you all. Cali, how you doing? Perfect timing. Comatose, good to see you all. How you doing? How you been? Now, Trump tariff news. Trump's new tariffs essentially stir Asia's tensions, and markets didn't react the way they should have. The crypto market, as I said before, can react in both ways when tariff news gets announced. The first time around when we had tariff essential news come out, the crypto market was in a shock. It didn't know how to react to the news, and it was on the negative side. Now, I reviewed a few nights ago on this live that the market can react in two different ways regarding tariff news we're going to, essentially get coming in soon, which is this particular tariff news, which is that the market could react in a positive way because it is seen as a hedge against essentially traditional assets, or the crypto market can react in a negative way again, essentially being surprised about the whole situation. It seems like the crypto market stayed on the positive side, even though the tariff situation has been announced. So here it is. No major market reactions after Trump essentially steeped tariffs on Japan and South Korea and other nations. He believes investors have already priced in the worst-case scenarios, including potential global conflicts. Meanwhile, rising essentially money supply points to bullish momentums for both stocks and crypto in the months ahead. Trump's administration confirmed a 25% tariff hike on Asian imports targeting Japan, South Korea, and China. These essentially new duties will start on August 1st, and previously Trump had delayed most of the planned essentially increases, keeping rates at 10%, to give countries time to negotiate. However, the little progress made, the US is now taking a harder stance towards the tariff policies. Beijing remains under pressure for the time being to strike a essentially deal before August 12th, or things are going to get much more worse for China regarding essentially the American tariffs. If no agreement is reached upon, Washington plans to reinstate earlier trade curbs. China's state-run newspaper, essentially, the People's Daily, published a stern warning through its policy, essentially, through its foreign policy voice. Zhang Xing, The article essentially emphasized that talks are necessary and labeled the US tariffs as bullying. Moreover, China hinted at essentially taking a strong retaliation steps once again. Observers now expect another round of tit-for-tat tariffs between the United States and essentially China. As it stands, the US charges essentially an average of 51.1% on duties on Chinese goods. In return, China essentially imposes an average 32.6% on American imports. This data, essentially sourced from the Peterson Institution, shows how strained the trade balance has become. Additionally, the new US tariffs are shaking up regional alliances right now. Vietnam recently also reached a separate agreement with Washington. It essentially agreed to slash its import tariffs to 20%, down from 46%. However, the deals do include a 40% tariff on goods on transships and from China through Vietnam's essentially port. Hence, the US aims to prevent a routed essentially Chinese exports from avoiding their duties. Beijing criticized countries trying to bypass China in regional supply chains. Also, it views these moves as threats to its market dominance. However, many Asian economies right now are eager for essentially to secure access to the world's largest markets. The competition is reshaping the global trade dynamics. Trump, once again, is putting massive amounts of pressure right now on China. If China doesn't come to the negotiation table once again by August 12th, then they're going to be harshly essentially criticized and harshly essentially tariffed. China, once again, is trying to do a tit-for-tat type of situation where they're saying, we won't give up our position. We are standing strong in front of Trump and his administration and so on. And on the other side, Trump is telling any countries that are letting Chinese imports go through their ports so they come to the United States for a different route to essentially not be tariffed the way they're supposed to be, then those countries will also be criticizing their movements as well. And Beijing is not happy about that. China is not happy about how Trump is trying to essentially, Trump administration itself, trying to control other countries from the regarding their purchases of Chinese goods or, essentially transshipping them, as how they said. That is what's going on right now. But the good news is, on all of that, is that the crypto market didn't react negative. As I said, there were two outcomes regarding the crypto market space. One outcome was that crypto could be seen, because we've had tariffs so far, and the crypto market has reacted to tariff news. So there had to be a certain stage where the crypto market just goes, we don't care regarding tariffs anymore, which is what's happened this time around. With Trump announcing essentially tariff plans, the crypto market so far has held up its own end. It hasn't essentially reacted in a negative way as it did in the past for 24 to 48 hours. It's actually quite positive today. Not ridiculously positive, but it is quite positive, which means crypto is being seen as a hedge against this tariff situation for the first time around, which is brilliant to see. The other outcome was that crypto just reacts the usual way when tariff situations happen, but it didn't react negative and actually reacted positive to the news, or held its space, you can essentially say. Now, moving on from that particular news to BlackRock. But before we talk about BlackRock, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or even statements to make, put it outside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's go inside the comment section first. Let me go straight into the tariff. Let me go straight into the BlackRock news. Let's see where we're at. Good evening, Miles and family. Ian, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles and CMF. Free and Feather, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Orphan, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Morning, Miles and CMF. Shelly, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Stormy, hi Miles and CMF, at work but listening. Let's go, Stormy. Good to see you as well. George, hi Miles and CMF. George, good to see you as well. How you doing? How you been? You're all in for perfect timing for the start of the second news on tonight's live, which is, hey, Sina, how you doing? This BlackRock. BlackRock's iShares Bitcoin ETF has reached an incredible amount of Bitcoin holdings right now, somewhere around 700,000 Bitcoin holdings. That's a new milestone right there. BlackRock's spot Bitcoin ETF has surpassed 700,000 Bitcoins in assets under management just a year and a half after its debut in January 2024. That is staggering. As more investors seek exposure to the world's largest and essentially oldest cryptocurrency, the iShares Bitcoin Trust IBIT ETF had already accumulated 698,919 Bitcoins as of July 3rd. According to the fund's page, IBIT's essentially 1,510 Bitcoins in net inflows on July 7th was enough to tip it over the 700,000 essentially Bitcoins it roughly has now right now. It's a huge milestone after the Independence Day holiday in the United States. That means essentially that makes it the asset under management worth around $75 $5.5 billion worth of essentially Bitcoin the BlackRock essentially is holding right now. Based on current prices per essentially CoinGecko's data, new milestones iShare Bitcoin ETF now holds over 700,000 Bitcoins. Did this essentially in 18 months? Ridiculous perspective that essentially came from Nate Garcia, the president of the ETF store, observed on his X post. Now, IBIT has notably become the most actively traded spot Bitcoin ETF since its launch, now holding over 3% of Bitcoin's total cap supply of 21 essentially million tokens. As pointed out by Bloomberg's senior ETF analyst Eric, the iShares BTC fund is now the third essentially highest revenue generating ETF for the world's largest asset manager out of 1,197 funds. And this is just $9 billion away from being the first. The US spot Bitcoin ETF also crossed the $50 billion essentially inflow milestone on Monday, with BlackRock's IBIT again leading those essentially total combined inflows with 700,000 Bitcoins in possession. Essentially, BlackRock's iShare Bitcoin Trust has overtaken nearly 600,000 Bitcoins held by Michael Saylor's strategy, which essentially started purchases back in 2020. Strategy is currently the world's largest corporate Bitcoin holder. However, BlackRock is pretty much leading the way. Since the historic introduction of the US essentially spot Bitcoin ETFs, it has become one of the most successful ETF launches of all time, not just as a cryptocurrency, but Bitcoin's ETF has been known as the most successful ETF in general, which is a very impressive. They have so far essentially amassed 1.25 million BTCs, oppressing the Bitcoin stockpile, supposedly owned by the legendary persona, Bitcoin's creator, Satoshi Nakamoto. According to essentially Eric, BlackRock's IBIT alone is now 62% of the way to exceed Satoshi as the top leader or top holder of Bitcoin in the world. BlackRock, the way BlackRock is climbing the ranks, well, to be fair, it's not BlackRock that's technically buying Bitcoins. It's their clients that go for Bitcoin ETFs, which essentially means BlackRock is holding some amounts of Bitcoin. But the way BlackRock is climbing the ladder right now, they're getting to a stage that they could eventually one day cross the amount of essentially what Satoshi has and what BlackRock will have in the future, which is also, it could play out very risky as well for BlackRock. Let's just assume for a second that BlackRock's wallet matches the amount that Satoshi is holding, for example, and that one day Satoshi, whoever this person may be or whoever this group may be, turns back on their wallet and decides to drop it on the market space. That could damage BlackRock quite badly, to be fairly honest. It could damage their essentially their client base. But then again, obviously, they do put up warning signs when it comes to buying ETFs anyways. But it could be, you know, ending very bad, just to see how time plays. But anyways, we don't know what the future is going to be holding, if Satoshi is going to wake up from the grave, or is the team that built Bitcoin going to wake up from the grave. But so far, we have had quite a lot of Bitcoin wallets that were essentially in the Satoshi era turned back on. A lot of wallets people assumed were lost forever. Now, moving on from BlackRock's new milestone to Hong Kong. Before we talk about Hong Kong news, let's go inside the comment section. First, as I said previously, this is live, just like always. If you have a question or even a statement to make, put it down inside the comment section. So let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see where we're at. Alex, hi Miles and family. Good to see you. Alex, how you doing? How you been? Frankie Brother says, good evening, brother Miles and CMF family. Frankie Brother, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What have I missed? Peeps, quite a bit. Good afternoon, CMF family. Christopher, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Also, just want to take 1 second just to say thank you so much to everybody, because I'm getting notifications back to back. Thank you so much to everybody from the CMF. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who has liked this live, who has retweeted this live if you're watching us on X, and put a comment outside the live. And thank you so much to everybody who's watching on YouTube right now, who's also liked the live and put a comment outside the live as well. Thank you so much. If you haven't done that, CMF members, take 5 seconds to like and retweet the live and put a comment outside the live as well. Davey, yes, Miles, let's go, Davey. Good to see you as well, brother. How you doing? How you been? BullXRP, good evening, Miles and CMF. Good to see you as well, BullXRP. How you doing? How you been? Good evening, Miles. Mike, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Frankie Butter says, maybe China will come clean and declare that they are holding Bitcoin. Maybe that could happen as well. We have discussed the, the matters of, is it China that was behind the whole idea of Bitcoin? There's always been suspicions that maybe China is the unknown Satoshi type of person, that a Chinese group or essentially a Chinese party made it, because China was the first country essentially in blockchain technology, the first country to go towards Bitcoin mining, to create a CBDC, to essentially establish wholesale retail CBDCs, to establish a social credit system wallet. Anything to do with this digital world that we're heading, China was well ahead of everybody else. miles ahead of everybody else. China's still miles ahead of everybody else as well when it comes to essentially this blockchain field. And, they're climbing the ranks of AI also. Now, Miles, BlackRock, Satoshi, they're all on together. Facts. Let's go. Ian, that's also an outcome as well. You never know, because we are dealing with very manipulative and corrupt people when it comes to high-profile people. Now, Hong Kong. We do know for a fact that stablecoins are the new hottest thing on the scene right now. The United States is going to be passing the Genius Act very, very soon. We're going to be having that week of cryptocurrency regulations starting essentially on the 14th of essentially this month. We're going to have the crypto week of regulations. And one of the things that's going to be discussed is the Genius Act. The United States is moving forward with the Stablecoin Act, which is massive, but the rest of the world is listening and following its footsteps. Whereas, for example, Hong Kong has decided, as we previously talked about as well, Hong Kong, recent news today that just came out, Hong Kong stablecoin ordinance set for August launch. Hong Kong is stepping into the spotlight of crypto regulations right now with Hong Kong stablecoin ordinance, which officially takes effect on August 1st, 2025. This new legal framework will allow stablecoin issuers to operate essentially under regulated regime, but with a limited room. Only a single-digit number of licenses will be issued. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority will begin accepting license applications on the same day the ordinance goes into effect. There's stablecoin essentially regulation. The limited number of licenses has triggered a rush among major players, especially from mainland China, with more than 40 companies, mostly top essentially financial institutions and internet giants, are reportedly gearing up to apply for a Hong Kong license. Apparently, Hong Kong is about to open its doors essentially to stablecoin fintech companies, but they have limited licensing the moment they open their doors. So 40 companies are right now trying to rush through that door before it opens. The Hong Kong Monetary Authority has made it clear stability and trust are more important than volume, which is very true. As I said previously, a lot of people do ask me regarding all these banks around the world that are creating stable coins. And people say, well, what's the point if this bank and that bank are going to create their own stable coins? And I said, most banks' stablecoin money will just become novelty items. And that's what essentially Hong Kong is referring to. Like, you don't need that many stable coins in the world. You don't need 25 versions of a digital dollars or 25 versions of a digital euros and so on. All you need is one or two good ones and you're good to go. No country needs 50 different types of stable coins or 100 different types of stable coins, or every bank in that country to be creating their own version of a stable coin, because it's just stupidity. Because the only people that will be using that, for example, would be essentially their own client base. So let's just say there's a person essentially in the United States with Bank of America, and Bank of America has created its own stable coin, its own digital dollars. JP Morgan creates its own digital dollars, and essentially it goes around. HSBC own digital dollars, and essentially Standard Chartered Bank, Barclays, all these banks start creating their own versions of digital dollars. It's just stupidity, because some banks around the world might not hold that particular type of stablecoin. If someone wants to do international transfers, that's going to be a bit of a situation. Also, people will get confused on, are they supposed to be holding Bank of a Dollar's digital dollars, JP Morgan's digital dollars, Barclays' digital dollars, HSBC's digital dollars, because it'll just become novelty items at that point. So the world only needs technically 2 or 3 digital dollars and 2 or 3 euros in terms of digital, 2 or 3 British pounds that are digital, and so on. We don't need 50 different types of stablecoins. And that is essentially what Hong Kong is referring to. Hong Kong is saying we are coming out with our stablecoin regulations right now, and we have limited space. It's not about volume when it comes to digital dollars. It's about who is right. In other words, who has the best product. Who has the best product as a digital dollars to be used in Hong Kong and outside of Hong Kong. And that's what Hong Kong is aiming for. So brilliant move on their side. By offering only a handful of licenses, regulators aim to maintain a tight oversight of this sensitive part of the crypto ecosystem. Stablecoins are often used for payments and remittances and DeFi essential operations. So any failure could essentially ripple through the financial systems. Great use of word there, ripple. Could that be a hint? This cautious approach is intended to avoid what regulators have seen essentially in other jurisdictions, an explosion of low quality or unbacked stablecoins. Hong Kong wants to be the hub of innovation, but not at the cost of financial stability, which means they're not going to be essentially accepting random stablecoins or any stablecoin that suddenly just produces out of thin air. Through names haven't been essentially, the names haven't been officially released yet of which digital dollars Hong Kong is going to be accepting. Insiders suggest that the applicants include some of China's largest fintechs also, in terms of and internet and banking firms. These players are drawn by Hong Kong's reputation as a global finance center and is bringing essentially a role between East and West right now. With essentially just a few licenses up for grabs, the competition is very intense in Hong Kong. Kong right now. These successful candidates will likely shape the future of stablecoin usage, not just in Hong Kong, but across Asia also. So honestly, I think this is going to be a play that most countries, or every country, is most likely going to play out, where they choose 2 or 3 essentially stablecoins to look at and see which one they want to process through, or it could just be 2 to 3 stablecoins in general, but not 50 types of stablecoins. It's just stupidity at that point. Before we go through the next news, let's go inside the comment section first. And I can also see that Ian has just put a £20 donation, and he said, "Let's go CMF, keep holding the firm." Ian, thank you so much for the £20 donation. Absolutely amazing, Ian. Thank you so much. It's going straight to that fund. 3-letter agency. Yep. Miles, Ian, respect. Let's go. Ian, well done, son. Hey, when XRP be high price, I was waiting long and my mom ready to kick me out. Johnny, you're going to give a little bit of time about XRP because 1 has the lawsuit. That's the first green light, needs to go away, which is going to go away very soon. 2 is regulations, which we have the week of regulations coming up. And also Ripple's essentially CEO doing a Senate hearing talking about Crypto Clarity Act. And third green light is pretty much after regulations, which is the green light of utility for cryptocurrencies to be able to decouple from Bitcoin. Good evening, Miles, and my apologies I'm late. Lena, no problem. Good to see you. How you doing? Now, Ian, once again, thank you so much for a £20 donation, brother. Absolutely amazing. US senators. This is a very unusual piece of news. I'll be very honest, because with everything that's going on around the world right now, with all the geopolitical tension situations that are happening in the Middle East, or even essentially with Russia and Ukraine, or even China and Taiwan sometimes get into it as well, and with the tariff situations that are happening around the world, there's a lot happening around the world right now. And while this is going on, a US senator has decided to add more fuel to the fire, he could say. So a US senator proposes a bill targeting Buchal's Bitcoin use in El Salvador. Now, everybody's very familiar essentially with El Salvador and the leader of El Salvador, how he's very Bitcoin friendly, pro-Bitcoin, and it was essentially the first country on the planet to be a Bitcoin country, to be known as a Bitcoin country. So this US senator has went out of his way to target the leader essentially of El Salvador and say that he's misusing his Bitcoins for corruption. The legislation titled the El Salvador Accountability Act of 2025, or file number S2058, would mandate the US Secretary of State to deliver a comprehensive report on how cryptocurrencies, particularly Bitcoin, are essentially allegedly being used by Buchal's government for corruption and sanction evasion. The bill outlines specific areas of investigation requiring essentially a detailed breakdown of El Salvador's crypto activities. The proposed report would examine the amount of public funds spent on Bitcoin and identify essentially all known wallet addresses associated with the government and assess whether digital assets are actually being used to circulate international sanctions. Now, key elements of this proposed report include an estimate of how much Bitcoin El Salvador has purchased, a list of exchanges used for these transactions, wallet addresses where the Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies have been stored, identification of individuals with access to these funds, an evaluation of potential corruption risk tied to the government's use of crypto, an investigation into whether Bitcoin is being used to bypass financial sanctions. This is all the things that this US senator wants from the leader of El Salvador regarding his Bitcoin holdings in his country. The bill brought forward by Senator essentially Von Hollen, Kalin, and Padawan marks a significant step in testifying U.S. scrutiny of El Salvador's Bitcoin strategy, which has drawn international attention since the country became the first in the world to adopt Bitcoin as a legal tender back in 2021. So, with everything that's going on in this world, with all the tariff situations and the war situations, why? Honestly, why? Why has a US senator went out of his way for no apparent reason to go after El Salvador's leader to say that he is misappropriating his funds or misusing his essentially nation's funds and so on? There was no need. There was no need whatsoever. It's just adding more fuel essentially to the fire, where El Salvador is now going to have a situation in terms of their crypto holdings with the United States. It doesn't really matter how much cryptocurrencies El Salvador holds. United States should be thinking about how much their cryptocurrency is going to be hold on, how fast they're going to be passing their regulations. This is what US senators should be mostly focused on. I'm not saying US senators are not focused on that, because they are. We are about to be having the crypto essentially week of legislations talking about essentially the Genius Act to be passed and the Clarity Act and the banking rules and so on, which is all very impressive and all things that we've been looking forward to for the longest time. But these three morons of senators decided to waste everybody's time going after El Salvador's leader for his Bitcoin holdings and how much he's spending in his country. It's got nothing to do with these senators. Now, honestly, those senators should spend more time passing legislations inside the United States than worrying about what the leader of El Salvador is doing with his Bitcoins. Donald Trump is what we're going to talk about next. Donald Trump's bold demand of once again firing essentially Jerome Powell, and he's saying essentially he must resign immediately. We all know that essentially the Fed chairman needs to be fired. That's a guaranteed situation, honestly. Jerome Powell, the Fed chairman, has wasted everybody's time by not doing rate cuts. And I know Jerome Powell is playing the card of, oh, well, Trump is creating uncertain times of tariffs, and it's therefore difficult to do any sort of tariff situation or rate cuts and so on. And that's his excuse for that whole mishap. But then we have the World Bank, the chairman of essentially World Bank, the former chairman of the World Bank, coming out and saying Jerome Powell is talking out of his arse. Everything he's saying makes zero sense, and that he can actually do rate cuts, but he just doesn't want to do rate cuts. So even though Jerome Powell insists that Trump is the reason he's not doing rate cuts because of tariff and uncertainty times, we have a former chairman of the World Bank coming out and saying he can do rate cuts, he just doesn't want to, and that every excuse he's pulling out the box makes no sense. So, in a move that sent ripples through financial markets and political circles, former US President Donald Trump recently made a startling essentially call for Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell to resign immediately once again. The direct challenge essentially to the independence of the nation's central bank was initially reported by Walter on Bloomberg's economic news account on X, reinitiating essentially a long-standing debate about the insertion of politics and monetary policies. For anyone essentially tracking the pulse of the US's economy and its key players, this essentially development is not just news, it's a significant indicator of potential shifts in economic sentiments and essentially policy directions. The latest demand for Donald Trump, essentially for Jerome Powell's resignation, is not an isolated incident, but rather the latest chapter in a tumultuous relationship between these two men. Throughout his presidency, Trump frequently criticized Jerome Powell and the Federal Reserve, particularly after essentially over their interest rate decisions. His arguments often centered on the beliefs that the Fed's actions were hindering economic growth and undermining his administration's efforts to boost the US economy, which is true. Jerome Powell doesn't want to boost the US economy on purpose because he's an absolute twat. This persistent public pressure on essentially independent institutions is unprecedented in modern American history, setting a very unique precedent for presidential engagements with monetary policies. Interest rate essentially disagreements. Trump consistently advocated for lower interest rates, often expressing essentially frustration when the Fed raised them, arguing it made the US exports more expensive and hindered competitiveness. Economic performances, despite the robust economic growth during his term, Trump essentially often attributed essentially any perceived slowdowns or market volatility directly to the Fed's decision, rather than essentially broader economic factors. Political posturing, the public's call for resignation, can also be seen as a form of political strategy aimed at glazing essentially his base and reflective blame for any economic headwinds. The ongoing tensions between political figures and the Federal Reserve, exemplified essentially by Donald Trump's call for Jerome Powell's resignation, underscores the delicate balance required to maintain a stable and credible economic environment. With such demands and captures headlines and spark debates, the resilience and independence of the Federal Reserve remains critical pillars as a long-term health of the US economy. As overseers, essentially as observers, understanding the nuance of this relationship and its potential implications is key to navigating the complexities of modern finance and politics. So, once again, Trump has come out and for many reasons has decided to go after Jerome Powell, which I fully understand, and I back Trump on going after the Fed chairman because he's useless. Honestly, he's absolutely useless. He just reminds you of Gary Gensler 2.0, an absolute weasel who has a very high seat position in somewhere in the government, or essentially in this case, the Fed. Now, moving on from that, but staying on the Trump news or the Trump administration side, Japan is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Japan and the United States, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any comments, put it down inside the comment section. More than happy to read them out and help you out. So here it is. Let's go inside the comment section first. Let's see where we're at. We were here. Alex says, why doesn't that senator go over there and find out for himself? What party is that senator from? I just know their names. I don't know the party they're from, essentially. That senator should clean up his own house. I agree. Fed CEO is under investigation. He definitely is. I agree. Hi, Miles, the CMF. Golden Dragon, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Ian, I agree. He is. Now, Japan. Japan has made a very, very big mistake by demanding a full tariff exemption from the United States. So Japan has decided to put its foot down on the whole tariff situation, which is odd because Japan is in a very crumbling situation, you could say, regarding their own economy. So I don't think this is the best time for Japan to be putting its foot down. Or you could say maybe it is the best time because Japan is crumbling from one side and they want to stand strong so they don't fully crumble. But here it is. Takashi, who essentially heads the Century and chairs of the Japan Association of Corporate Executives, criticized essentially Tokyo's take on take it or leave it approach in negotiations with Washington. He called it a big mistake. Even some head of Japanese are coming out and saying maybe that wasn't the best approach we had inside the United States. Japan basically has a negotiation with Washington regarding their tariff policies and puts essentially an absurd deal on the table and says to the United States, take it or leave it. When they come back to Japan after that stupid meeting that they had, Japanese leaders or Japanese heads weren't really happy with their own government for putting such a stupid deal on the table in front of Washington, especially at times like this. So Takashi argued that Japan's demand for complete relief from levies of President Donald Trump proposed left American negotiators feeling betrayed. America feels betrayed right now when it comes to Japan. And that's the last thing you want to do, which is annoy Trump. He proposed that accepting a 10% minimum tariff instead of essentially insisting on zero might have yielded more advantageous conditions, and they essentially underestimated the determination of Trump, he told the Financial Times. They thought Times was essentially on Japan's side. It was a big mistake. He also warned that because 25% tariffs are coming, Japan's negotiation power is weaker, and it might have to give in a strike a deal. He warned that there is less time to reach a deal before July 20th on the upper house elections, when essentially Asia's party called essentially lose in its majority, it could be too late also. And earlier this year, the Japanese government swiftly initiated talks aiming for a swift pact that would shield exporters from Trump's threatened tariffs. However, on Monday, the U.S. administration imposed that 25% duty essentially on imports from Japan, 1 percentage point higher than the April proposal after negotiations failed. Trump introduced the tariff situation for a number of Asian countries such as South Korea, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Now, originally announced essentially in April, but postponed until July 9th, these updated duties are set to be implemented on August 1st. HSBC, for example, strategists observed that Tokyo may struggle to concede more in talks as the July essentially 20 elections draws near. The governing essentially coalition has compelled to safeguard vital sectors, namely automotive exporters and rich rice producers, also those that are backing essentials. Negotiations between Tokyo and Washington have dragged on for weeks, even as officials on both sides previously and privately claimed that they are having some sort of advances between them. There wasn't any. And in recent days, Trump criticized Japan as spoiled, reapproaching as reluctant to increase U.S. rice imports or grant entry to American-made vehicles. He also criticized Japan's inflexible farm policies. He argued that Asia's refusal to prioritize the interests of rice growers over their auto industry weakened the late Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's efforts to foster close ties with Trump. Trump had high expectations of Japan because of Mr. Abe, and Japan could become a showcase. And also, we needed to analyze that level of that expectation. However, during discussions, Tokyo pushed for total exemption for American tariffs, contended that the essentially bilateral alliance warranted essentially their treatments, and sources in both Washington and Tokyo have indicated that the lead negotiator, Russia, despite essentially extensive calls and in-person negotiations, lacked the mandate to make consensus, any sort of decisions on duty. Now, supporting Naisha's essentially assessment, David Bowling, the Eurasian essentially group's director of Japan and Asian trade and former US trade representative, said Tokyo's insistence on removing every levy was a grave misjudgment. He categorized the stance as a fantasy and warned if Japan wants to reach a deal by August 1st, it needs to be more essentially sympathetic, you could say. And also, they spent about 40 minutes meeting Howard Lungten, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. Officials in Tokyo noted that he was prematurely ready to travel to Washington for further negotiations. In early May, also, Toruko, a chairman of the Japanese Business Federation, recommended a prompt but measured approach by hanging tough, dinging, and essentially negotiations with a sense of softness. Now, at the same time, Mr. Bishu, who essentially sits on the boards of multiple leading corporations, argued that a softer yen would cushion the impact of their duties. He also observed that they would be happy to take 145 yen in exchange for tariffs, compared to about 110 yen in the dollar during Trump's essentially first term. So, Japan decided to go and meet in Washington, have a discussion on the phone, and essentially, back and forward. And Japan decided, out of all the discussions, and at the end of all discussions, to throw a deal on the table for Washington, D.C. to accept. The deal was absolutely absurd. It worked out in complete favor of Japan and not in favor of the United States at all. And Japan technically played it as take it or leave it to Washington, D.C. This might have been the most stupidest thing, essentially, this member of the Japanese government did, because he did get criticized when he went back to Japan, and they pretty much told him, from every angle, every essentially major Japanese player as a CEO or executive or board members or so on have all come forward and said that Japan's government is actually ruining essentially their relationship with the United States and with Trump by putting this absurd deal on the table. What absolute moron. I don't know who thought it was a brilliant idea to do that. But that's not going to end very well for Japan. But Japan does have a second chance, which is to make a deal before August 1st, or hell is going to break loose on Japan, especially with that economy that Japan has right now. It is crumbling. Second point, the last time the Japanese market essentially struggled, it did impact the stock market and the crypto markets as well, something to consider. Now, moving on from the Japanese news and their ridiculous offer on the table to Reserve One. Reserve One is going to launch a $1 billion Bitcoin-dominated digital asset reserve. So if you're not familiar with a company by the name of Reserve One, don't be essentially, worried, because neither was I until today. Reserve One, a newly formed firm inspired by the proposed US Bitcoin reserve, has announced plans to go public through a SPAC merger with M3 Bridge, an acquisition V essentially Corp, and it's going to go on the Nasdaq. In other words, Reserve One plans to hold a diversified crypto portfolio led by Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, and some other cryptocurrencies. So Reserve One is a company that's newly formed and is about to go public. Well, they're applying to go public. The filings are saying. And they said that when they do go public, or before they go public, they're going to be creating themselves a crypto portfolio, which obviously they're going to expand into further on. The tokens that they've mentioned so far that they're going to be starting out in is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, and a few other ones they haven't mentioned. But it is a company that's creating a crypto portfolio instead of just a Bitcoin reserve. The newly formed company plans to participate in staking for different essentially supported altcoins to offer its shareholders a essentially reliable yield. Furthermore, the Reserve One will also participate in crypto lending through DeFi smart contracts to ensure a secure stream of yield. By moving towards a public listing, we're reinforcing our commitments to responsible innovation and financial inclusion now, and the development of a more resilient, transparent market for digital assets. Our disciplined, essentially yield-focused strategy is designed to set a new standard for regulated crypto investing. Jamie Leverton, CEO of Reserve One, essentially noted. Reserve One will have more than $1 billion in exposure to facilitate the purchase and management of diversified baskets of crypto assets. The newly formed company will essentially work with Coinbase Global as the custodian of the digital assets led by Bitcoin, led by essentially BTC. The SPAC acquisition deal saw M3 Bridge nearly $300 million added to its account for Reserve One. An aggregated of essentially $750 million was committed by veteran crypto investors. Around $500 million of committed, essentially the $750 million will consist of common equity and about $250 million from private investments in public equities as well. Some essentially of the notable investors in the newly formed Reserve One firm include Blockchain.com, CC Capital, Falcon X, Galaxy Digital, Hinved Capital, Kraken, Mentor, Moncro Asset Management, Origin Protocol, Pandora Capital, Power5 Capital, and Republic of Digital. These are big names inside the crypto space. And all these companies are standing behind a company by the name of Reserve One, who is about to go public and essentially create its own crypto portfolio. And their budget is $1 billion. They're not creating just a Bitcoin reserve like MicroStrategy. They're creating a crypto portfolio. And they said in their own words, they're going to be having a basket of cryptocurrencies, which they mentioned some, but didn't mention the rest. And their budget is $1 billion. I like that they're going for a basket of cryptocurrencies, not just a Bitcoin essentially basket. Now, as a public company, Reserve One claims to lead with a strict reserve, responsibly unlocking shareholder value and setting a standard for digital financial innovation, Reeve Collins, CEO, M3 Bridge, noted. This is something that other companies will probably follow in suit, because we do have that essentially Bitcoin reserve type of style of companies, public companies that are doing right now because of MicroStrategy. But this could set essentially a new president, a company that's coming out, going public, having $1 billion budget backed by big names inside the crypto space in terms of crypto firms or VC firms, spending about $1 billion to create a crypto basket. This should, maybe give the idea or the impression that other companies should follow in suit regarding a basket of cryptocurrencies rather than just one cryptocurrencies. Everybody knows one of the most oldest sayings you could pretty much say in Wall Street is never put all your eggs in the same basket. So that's why I've never understood the idea of essentially just putting Bitcoin in your basket as a company and saying, yep, that's it. It's a stupid plan. Nobody ever does that in the real, essentially in Wall Street. So I never understood the reasons of that. But obviously I understood the token supply situation of Bitcoin, which is the scarcity situation and so on. But it's always better to have a basket of cryptocurrency, especially at these prices. We all know for a fact that some of these crypto projects are going to do tremendously well under regulations, because regulations equals the utility. So I'm very impressed by this company creating a basket of cryptocurrencies, having $1 billion budget and going public and backed by very big names inside the crypto space. Now, moving on from that, which is very good news, to Tether. So Tether essentially has decided to reveal something for the first time in its life. It's decided to reveal $8 billion in gold stored in a secret Swiss vault. So here it is. The facility, essentially fully owned by Tether, was set up essentially to cut long-term custody costs and assert control essentially over the company's expanding physical reserves. CEO of Tether told essentially Bloomberg, the move is a part of a broader cost-saving and independent strategy. He said, if you have your own vault, eventually with the size it gets much cheaper, he said. With $159 billion in USDT circulating, nearly 5% of Tether's reserves are now in precious metals, most of it in gold. So Tether has so far revealed 5% of its reserves. Where's the other 95%? Unlike other institutions that rely on third-party custodians, Tether chooses to manage storage internally. That raises more questions, obviously, for Tether. Companies decide to use third parties to essentially ensure, their how much assets they're holding and so on. Tether decides to obviously do all these things within itself. They don't want help from third parties in any sort of a way when it comes to their portfolio, to their treasury. That decision is not only to save on fees, typically 50 basis points, but signals a push into a realm of traditionally dominated by central banks. Tether's gold position is now par with major global banks like UBS. But there is a catch. New regulations in the US and EU could force stablecoin issuers to Sorry about that, everyone. Sorry about that, everyone. Now, to sidestep that issue, Tether also essentially issues a separate gold-backed token, XAUT, pegged to physical gold. Am I back? Can everybody see me? Yep, we're back. Okay. To sidestep that issue, Tether also issues a separate gold-backed token, XAUT, pegged to physical gold held in Switzerland. With 7.7 tons of backing, roughly $819 million in circulation, it remains small compared to the mainstream gold ETFs, but is part of a long-term strategy. If XAUT scales, vault ownership could save the companies hundreds of millions in fees annually. The CEO of Tether essentially sees gold as a hedge against fiat instability, citing growing essentially BRICS demands and essentially mounting the US debt. Gold is logically safer than any national currency, he said, but Tether's increasing reliance on hard-to-track assets like gold is likely deepening the regulatory scrutiny. Even so, the company is doubling down by owning physical infrastructure and hedging against hard assets. Tether is preparing for a future that may be less reliant on traditional financial rails and potentially harder for regulators to pin down. That's all good regarding what Tether is doing on essentially, stocking up on gold. The only issue with that is, and it's going to backfire and already has, is that Tether wasn't allowed in the EU because one, the transparency situation was a big deal for the EU, and two, Tether essentially didn't want to hold any of their cash reserves or essentially their bonds and so on inside of EU banks. And the EU wanted this because obviously just in case Tether depegs one day for some oddly reason, that if that does happen, that at least EU banks are holding some sort of reserves that, it wouldn't damage the EU economy if too many businesses or, retail section are using USDT. So all good and well that Tether is essentially using gold, and the same gold is a better, a reserve asset to back their stablecoin, even though they've only showed 5% of their reserves and 95% of their reserves are still not shown. That's what's backfiring on Tether not being allowed to essentially operate in the EU, and also Tether is going to have difficulty in the US, essentially not holding a correct amount of US bonds or essentially US debts and so on regarding their digital dollars, USDT. Now, moving on from Tether to Metaplanet, the Japanese company everybody essentially has been talking about for the longest time inside the crypto space, mainly due to following the exact same footsteps that essentially strategy Michael Saylor left behind. Because Metaplanet has set a very bold plan to buy a digital bank. Now, keeping in mind, Metaplanet was a public Japanese company that was struggling to make essentially ends meet. And at one point, Metaplanet was about to go bust completely. And then one day, Metaplanet decided to come up with the idea of copying MicroStrategy's footsteps and creating a Bitcoin reserve, which worked out very well. Their stocks went through the roof, and you fast forward to today, where they hold a tremendous amount of Bitcoin. And also now they're getting ready to buy a digital bank because they want to do a crypto bank. So Metaplanet, a company listed on Tokyo Stock Exchange, is taking a new and bold approach to business, growth essentially using Bitcoin. The company, which holds a significant amount of top cryptocurrencies, aims to utilize its substantial crypto holdings to finance an acquisition of profitable businesses. Metaplanet's CEO Simon recently shared that the company plans to buy a digital bank in Japan. That's essentially, this represents a significant shift from its original business direction as a hotel operator. Just to put in perspective, Metaplanet was a hotel operator who was struggling. Their company was about to essentially go bust fully. Decided to buy Bitcoin, stocks went through the roof essentially because they just became the Japanese version of MicroStrategy, and now as a hotel operator to bank owner. In 2024, Metaplanet began buying Bitcoin to hedge against inflation. Since then, it has continued to add to its reserves. By early July 2025, the company owned 15,555 Bitcoins after spending $239 million to buy 2,205 more, essentially, Bitcoins. With this, the Japanese-based firm is now the 5th largest public company in the world, holding essentially flagship crypto. On average, it has paid about $99,985 with each coin. For each coin, the company's long-term goal is to own over 210,000 Bitcoins by 2027. This will be around 1% of Bitcoins essentially that will ever exist. Metaplanet's leadership sees this aggressive accumulation essentially as a critical first phase. The goal is to achieve levels of Bitcoin ownership that places the company significantly ahead of any potential competitors. I'm guessing Japanese market space mostly. In essentially in the next phase of its plan, Metaplanet intends to use its Bitcoin holdings as collateral. This would enable the company to access loans and raise funds, much like business use stocks for government bonds. This when things can go south. Metaplanet has decided to use its Bitcoin holdings to borrow against it. If Bitcoin for some odd reason decides to go downhill, then that can obviously damage the money that they've borrowed to hedge against it essentially as a collateral. These funds would then be used to acquire companies that generate steady income. One of main targets under consideration is a digital bank. The company believes it can offer better services than regular banks by entering the digital financial space. This plan is a part of Metaplanet's goal to mix digital assets with modern financial services. To help grow the business, Metaplanet may issue preferred essentially shares instead of taking a regular debt. This choice helps the company avoid repaying loans under strict rules or adjusting their share prices. With this method, Metaplanet aims to attract long-term investors without the stress of short-term essentially repayments. Metaplanet is not generating significant revenue yet, but its stock has increased by over 345% this year, pushing its market value above $70 billion, and this considerable jump indicates that there may essentially be indicators or confidence in Metaplanet's strategy to focus on Bitcoin. And this sharp rise in stock value is similar to what has happened on Strategy, a US company that owns essentially a very large amount of Bitcoin. So good on essentially Metaplanet for essentially coming out and deciding to buy a bank, a digital bank. That is ridiculous, but good on them, and good to see that essentially traditional space connecting more to the financial, essentially the digital space. Incredible. From a company that was a hotel operator which was struggling to make essentially ends meet to now bank owner. Now, Trump media is what we're going to talk about next. But before we talk about Trump media, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is a live show, which means if you do have any comments or questions to make, put them inside the comment section. More than happy to help you out. So let's go inside the comment section first, and then we go straight into the Trump media social news. Let's see where we're at. We were at here. Happy Pisces. Oh, hi, Miles of CMF. Golden Dragon, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Happy Pisces, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? Japan holds billions in US bonds, and if they dump, then America's in major trouble, Miles. That's also true. Yes, Japan does hold $1 billion or $1 trillion essentially in US bonds. I think it's $1 billion in US bonds. If they do drop it, obviously, it'll be very bad for the United States, but also 10 times worse for Japan if they do such a maneuver, because they'll lose the United States as an ally, and Trump is not somebody you want to backstab. Even in Miles of CMF, Jason, good to see you. How you been? I'm 45 years old man living home with mom. I need XRP to go to high prices. Johnny, don't worry, it will go. Hello, Miles and CMF. Luthier, good to see you. How you been? Just need patience. Miles, 100% facts. Let's go, Ian. Hi, Miles and CMF family. It is time to turn on my CMF TV. It has been a long time, but I'm still following your videos after work. Good to see you, all my friends. Let's go, Carl. Good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What's the account number? Your back audio only. Let's go. Yep. Susie, hi. Yep, we're back. Richard, we're back. Hello again, beautiful people. Thompson, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What do you think about Ondo? What do I think about Ondo Finance? It's a great project. I actually was one of the few people who mentioned Ondo Finance day one when it was released. Ondo Finance is doing tremendous work. I've always talked about Ondo Finance on a good level. I talked about how essentially it's involved itself into holding a tremendous amount of the tokenization side of essentially IBIT, which is for BlackRock. So Ondo Finance in general has done quite a lot in tokenization. I do think it's going to have a very good play ahead of itself in tokenization field as well. Hello, Miles. Good, glad to see you today. Scott, good to see you. How you doing? How you been? What up? Japanese are very versatile. True, that's true. Can you comment on GameStop? Yes, I can, Susie. What would you like to know about GameStop? If you want to know, is GameStop a surviving company? Yes. Is GameStop going to be creating a Bitcoin essential portfolio? By the looks of it, yes. They have purchased some amounts of Bitcoin. Is GameStop going to buy more Bitcoin ETFs? Probably yes. Is GameStop's essentially stock good to go for? Probably not. It wouldn't be something I would invest in. I'll be honest. I would never invest into GameStop. There's no point of me investing in GameStop. However, due to the whole maneuver of GameStop regarding how much the Bitcoin acquisitions they're doing and how they want to go digital and so on, good on them. Hope it works out. It's not a stock that I would touch. Hope that helps. Is Japan full regulated with crypto and digital banks? Not fully, but somewhat. They are essentially having discussions, you could say. Regulated. Account number for Tether Gold Miles. Do they have it? They give it up? They don't have it, actually, no. Thanks, Miles. I was hesitating between Ondo and Hot. No problem, call anytime. Hot is also good as well, but obviously Ondo has a bigger play, but Hot, if it hits, it really hits. Now, Trump Media. Trump Media's Truth Social files for a cryptocurrency ETF. I'm guessing some people have heard the news regarding essentially Trump Media and the Truth Social files for cryptocurrency ETFs, regarding what ETFs they've essentially applied for. So here it is. Trump Media and Technology Groups Corp. Truth Social filed for a cryptocurrency ETF with the SEC on the New York Stock Exchange Acura, managed by Crypto.com. This filing enhances institutional exposure to cryptocurrencies and signals Truth Social's venture into financial markets. Truth Social, the media arm of Trump Media Technology Group Corp., filed for a new crypto ETF. Covering Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Crow, XRP, the filing signals institutional engagements with digital currencies. The ETF named Truth Social, essentially crypto blue chip ETF, includes 5 cryptocurrencies. So the same way Grayscale decided to introduce that basket of cryptocurrency ETFs, Trump's media essentially has also decided to introduce a basket of crypto ETFs. You know what's interesting? The Grayscale one obviously got paused, which was very odd because Grayscale does sue. But there's no way in hell that the SEC is going to be able to hold back Trump's Truth Social media, essentially, because we do know who is backing that, and it is Trump himself or his family. So the launch of a Truth Social, essentially crypto blue chip ETF, is pending effectiveness of the registration statement, as well as an approval from a Form 19B4 filing with the SEC, Donald Trump's essentially founder, Trump Media and Technology Group. This is Trump project applying for a basket of crypto ETFs. And in that ETF, essentially basket of ETFs, is XRP also, and Crow, and Solana, essentially, in Bitcoin and Ethereum. Yeah, the SEC can't essentially, extend this one, or essentially, if they do, that's a very stupid maneuver, or in any sort of a way, reject it at all. And I think this might actually get much more faster approval than Grayscale. For some reason, Grayscale getting paused. And the SEC's mention of they paused, essentially, the scenario is they paused the Grayscale ETF right at the end before they made a transition happen, because the SEC is coming out with a much more easier 1-2 step for getting an ETF. So they want to introduce that and just put everybody in that and just pass it through that instead of passing one by one. That was the SEC's pretty much excuse on that matter. But this one's going to be hard to reject, I'll be very honest, because the moment Trump's essentially founder, Justin Sun, for example, invested into Truth Media, or essentially the Truth, the World Liberty Financial Project, which is also related to Trump's family, that essentially made Justin Sun get off the SEC list. The SEC was heavily going after Justin Sun, but after that investment, they stopped. So you could tell what power the Trump family holds. Immediate market effects are apparent on the 5 involved cryptocurrencies. There might also be a heightened, essentially, trading activity for these assets. The move may inspire other politically affiliated media outlets to consider similar strategies. The ETF aligns with market regulations, as it essentially follows a traditional registration process on the New York Stock Exchange, essentially Acura. Political associations might bring increased scrutiny or interest from stakeholders due to Trump's essentially involvement. The ETF's essentially outcomes could reshape investor strategies and regulatory approaches within the crypto sector. Historical also ETF launches have occasionally sparked volatility. However, the involvement of political essential figures and institutions adds unique dimensions. So that is Truth Social Media applying for a basket of cryptocurrencies, exactly the same as Grayscale. That one will be very difficult for the SEC to extend or even to reject. Now, because we've seen in the past what type of power Trump's family has with the SEC, and that's quite good. Grayscale, on the topic of Grayscale rebalances their crypto funds and adds Ondo and Hedera. In a second quarter 2025 review, the asset manager added Ondo Finance to its DeFi fund and Hedera to its smart contract platform fund. Following the rebalance, the Grayscale DeFi fund now holds Uniswap at 34.1%, Ava at 30.74%, Ondo Finance at 18.22% as its largest component, signaling confidence in Ondo's growing presence in decentralized finance. which was perfect timing for that question I was asked regarding on the finance as well. I think it's going to do quite well for itself. Meanwhile, the Grayscale smart contract, as I said previously, is going to do well for itself. Meanwhile, the Grayscale smart contract fund, GSC, dropped essentially Polkadot in favor of Hedera. Grayscale dropped Polkadot. If anybody's into Polkadot, Grayscale dropped Polkadot completely and went for Hedera. This revised top allocations now include Ethereum at 30.22%, Solana at 29.87%, Cardano at 18.57%, with H1 newly added to the mix. Obviously, they hold XRP as well. The firm's AI-focused fund, which includes the top players like Bitsonar, Near Protocol, and Render, remains unchanged this quarter, maintaining its exposure to blockchain projects pushing the boundaries of artificial intelligence. Grayscale continues to refine its products lineup in response to the evolving crypto sector dynamics, positioning itself as a key player in systemic digital asset investing. Grayscale decides to drop Polkadot for Hedera, decides to expand on their finance and Hedera, and that was just their rebalance that they did essentially according to their recent filings. Now, tokenized gold is what we're going to talk about next. So here it is. Tokenized gold breaks $19 billion in volume, rivaling major gold ETFs. So tokenized gold, a digital version of gold, is actually doing better as essentially an ETF than a gold ETF is doing. So tokenized gold trading volume has now surpassed $19 billion so far this year, outpacing many popular gold ETFs. Tokenized assets are gradually proving to be a viable alternative to traditional investment instruments. According to essentially a July 8th report by CEX.io, tokenized gold is gaining traction compared to traditional gold ETFs. The asset class has attracted $19 billion in trading volume this year, outpacing several widely held gold ETFs, while tokenized gold still trails major ETFs like SPDR Gold Shares, GLD in other words, and iShares Gold Trust, IAU in other words. It has surpassed many smaller counterparts. The asset class now sees higher trading volume than SGOL, AAAU, and IAAUM, and OUNZ. Moreover, the growth in tokenized gold trading volume has significantly outpaced all gold ETFs so far this year. In the second quarter of 2025, volume in the asset class rose from $2.4 billion to $19.2 billion, an eightfold increase. This marks a part of a broader trend as tokenized gold has outperformed gold ETFs in essentially trading volume growth for 4 consecutive quarters. According to CEX.io, this outperformance suggests that capital is shifting from gold ETFs to tokenized gold assets. And according to essentially the CEX.io report, most of the new trading volume is tokenized gold is being driven by retail and crypto native investors. Meanwhile, institutional investors continue to dominate traditional gold ETFs. Notably, the number of PAX-G essential holders grew by 25%, while XAUT holders increased by 151%, highlighting a significant influx of new traders into the markets. Still, tokenized gold continues to trail ETFs in terms of market capitalization. For instance, GDL's total essentially market cap rose 36%, while tokenized gold grew just 29%. This indicates that tokenized gold is not essentially yet widely perceived as long-term store of value. Rather, most traders still use it as a utility asset within DeFi's ecosystem. So, tokenized gold is actually doing better as an ETF than traditional gold ETFs. That is impressive, and a very rapid pace as well. Very rapid pace. Now, we're going to move on from tokenized gold news to Bit Digital. So, a company, a public company that's listed on the Nasdaq, has decided to drop all of its Bitcoin for another crypto asset. So here it is. Bit Digital shifts Bitcoin holdings to Ethereum. Nasdaq-listed Bit Digital has shifted its entire Bitcoin holdings to Ethereum, aiming to enhance its treasury strategy. Led by CEO Sam Tabor, Bit Digital converted its entire Bitcoin reserves as a public company into Ethereum. This major move positions the company to leverage Ethereum's programmable nature and staking potential. Tabor emphasized that Ethereum as an integral essential to their long-term strategy. He said, "We believe Ethereum has the ability to rewrite the entire financial system." No, it doesn't. I'll be very honest. For anybody out there, this could be a retail person, a CEO, an executive board member, a Fed chairman, a chairman of the SEC, CFTC, a banking organization or an institution. Ethereum is not a great, essentially, asset for financial use cases. okay? Because if you're trying to say that Ethereum is the best when it comes to finance, it's the best for money transfers, the best in terms of an actual money form or a middleman, gas token or so on, it's the worst. It's the slowest and most expensive. And the most simplest way I could do this is, or put this, is that essentially, if I have a friend, the metaphor that I would use, the most simplest way is, if I have a friend, let's say, and my friend essentially has a XRP bank card, and I have an Ethereum bank card, and my other friend has a HSBC bank card, for example, or Barclays bank card, and we decide to essentially make a transaction by sending money abroad or to a friend or family that's in domestic or essentially a national situation. If my essentially XRP friend sends money, it will be there instantly, pretty much no fees. If my other friend that uses a traditional bank like HSBC or Barclays Bank to send money to another friend or family member, it will be instantly and pretty much no fees. Now, me, who let's say is going to use Ethereum to send money, it will probably get there in 2 hours' time because if the network is congested, or an hour's time, and that my fee will probably be $20, $30 or $40, depending on what I'm trying to transfer and how congested the network is. So which one is better in this sense? My XRP friend, my Barclays HSBC friend, or me, who uses Ethereum? Ethereum only has one feature, which was smart contracts, but it got outplayed by everybody else. So it's the worst when it comes to finance. At that point, it's just common sense. Honestly, it's just common sense. So this company decided to go away from Bitcoin holdings and dump their entire Bitcoin holdings to go for Ethereum because they see Ethereum as a better option for finance. Well, I understand why they dropped Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is not great for finance. That's also slow and expensive when it gets congested. So then this company decided that because Bitcoin is not good for finance, Bitcoin is better for an asset you want to store on the sidelines. And they dropped Bitcoin because it's obviously not quick enough and it's obviously too expensive when it gets congested. So then they decided to go for Ethereum, which is more congested sometimes and also more expensive on fees sometimes. Is that going backwards or forwards? Ethereum's programmable nature, growing adoption, and staking yield models represent the future of digital assets in their words. Bit Digital is aligning itself with Ethereum's long-term potential, positioning itself as a focused Ethereum treasury platform in the public markets. We are starting with the exposure to over 100k Ethereum for now, but we intend to aggressively add more so we become essentially the top holding when it comes to Ethereum holdings. This decision involved liquidating essentially 280 Bitcoins and raising $172 million in public offerings. The financial transformation shows Bit Digital's commitment to becoming a leading ETH holder. The firm's Ethereum treasury now stands at 100,603 Ethereum. The immediate market response to this transition was favorable. Bit Digital's share price increased by 18.4%, contrasting with declines in other Bitcoin mining firms. The highlights essentially a positive reception from its investors and confidence in Ethereum's growth. Financially, Ethereum's growing adoption and staking revenue potential was cited as incentives for the shift. This transformation indicates a diversification trend in how companies manage crypto assets. As the Nasdaq essentially listed entity, Bit Digital's strategy shifts could influence other publicly traded companies' strategies essentially and industries. Insiders acknowledge this streak essentially pivot as a precedent for larger treasury relocations. Ethereum's increasing market position adds to its attractiveness for corporate treasuries. Future regulatory considerations include potential scrutiny on crypto treasury holdings and business models. Firms like essentially Bit Digital, leading with Ethereum, could face new regulations focused on asset management and disclosures. This evolution might further embed Ethereum into the corporate landscape. Honestly, all the best to Bit Digital trying to go for Ethereum. It also does show that they're trying to go for quantity at this time around because they only had 280 Bitcoins, which they liquidated to buy Ethereum. You could have just went for XRP and called it a day, honestly. If you want to go for finance and cryptocurrencies, why look further than XRP? Honestly, if you want to go for AI in the crypto space, then obviously XRP is not the best one for you. If you want to go for gaming inside the crypto space, then obviously XRP is not the best one for you. But if you want to go for finance, why look further than XRP? That company will realize the stupidity later on. later on, most likely. Now, XRP wins a fresh adoption in Japan. Staying on the topic of XRP, XRP is doing quite well for itself in Japan. But before we go through that news, let's go inside the comment section first. As I said previously, this is live, which means if you do have any questions or comments to make, put it down inside the comment section. So let's see where we're at inside the comment section. We were at here. All this talk of Japan, this could be the beginning of a reserve carry trade, which will definitely jump oil prices and increase crypto prices dramatically, which is true, yes. Fair point at prices. So Tether is full of hot air once again, Miles, pretty much, Ian. Hopefully they will consider Shiba Inu ETF soon. You never know. I'll be honest, Shiba Inu is actually doing well for itself regarding that contract they have with essentially the UAE. Hopefully, yeah, big boys only see BTC and ETH. Not really, but I can see where you're going with that. Thompson says number 1 XRP, baby. Number 2 XLM. Number 3 XDC. Let's go. I like the list. Miles, many thanks to you, brother. You're a warrior, and those institutions haven't caught up with you/us yet. Much love and respect, brother. Don't know where we'd be without you, Miles. Ian, thank you so much, honestly, for the kind words. Means the world to me, because it does show that, you know, essentially you all, you know, everyone's listening to my words, and, you know, but honestly, thank you so much, Ian, for the kind words. Absolutely amazing. Love you all. Love you too, brother. Now, XRP wins fresh adoption in Japan. A groundbreaking, essentially, development for digital asset integrations. A+, a credit card service under the Shinsein Bank Group, has teamed up with SBI VC Trade to essentially allow customers to redeem reward points for cryptocurrencies, including XRP. People in Japan can use their card to make purchases and then redeem points on XRP. This marks the first time cryptocurrencies have been included in A+ points program, signaling a new chapter for mainstream crypto adoption in Japan. A+ cardholders essentially can now convert their accumulated points into major digital assets like XRP, Bitcoin, and Ethereum. Until now, A+ points could only be exchanged for traditional rewards such as consumer goods, digital vouchers, cash equivalents, and mileage programs. For example, customers could transfer 1,000 points into all Nippon Airlines miles in the Japanese airlines. The system is simple. Users earn 1 A+ point for every 200 yen spent, and those essentially who spend over 50,000 yen in a month receive 0.5% in bonus. Points are valid for about 2 years from month they are earned, giving customers a generous window for redemption. With this latest update, customers can now redeem 2,100 points, which is essentially for 2,000 yen plus, worth of XRP, Bitcoin, or Ethereum, providing an easy unwrapped card for cardholders looking to enter the world of crypto through everyday spending. This development is made possible through a partnership with SBI VC Trade, the digital asset exchange arm of SBI Holdings, one of Japan's largest financial groups. The move underscores SBI's ongoing commitment to expanding the utility of cryptocurrencies in Japan's traditional financial systems. SBI's relationship with Ripple has been particularly very strong and staying strong. When SBI VC Trade launched in 2018, XRP was the only available trading option on the platform. Since then, SBI has expanded its XRP-related offerings, including the introduction of an XRP lending service earlier this year. Additionally, SBI Holdings has embraced blockchain-based innovations, launching a NFT project on the XRP ledger, further demonstrating its investments in Ripple's ecosystem and its broader belief in Web3 infrastructure. XRP's inclusion in its cutting-edge reward program is yet another sign of a strong position in the Japanese market space. Unlike in other regions where regulatory uncertainty has clouded their token's future, Japan has maintained a very clear supportive stance on enabling XRP to flourish in both retail and institutional spaces. The fact that XRP is a part of this initiative is no surprise, with its deep-rooted ties to SBI Holdings and solid foundation in Japan's crypto landscape. XRP remains one of the country's most widely accepted and actively promoted digital asset. This integration could signal a broader trend in how traditional financial products engage with digital currencies by allowing customers to passively gain exposure to cryptocurrencies through daily spendings. A+ and SBI VC Trade are essentially bridging the gap between conventional finance and decentralized future. If widely adopted, such models could revolutionize the way reward programs function, turning routine purchases into opportunities for investors and emerging in technologies. The addition of essentially of XRP alongside Bitcoin and Ethereum to A+ points program is more than just a new redemption option. It's a clear indication of Japan's forward-thinking approach to crypto adoption, backed by influential SBI Group and seamlessly integrated into everyday financial tools. XRP continues to cement its role as a leader in Japan's evolving digital financial ecosystem. So Japan has created a reward system. Essentially, A+, a credit company in Japan, has created a reward system that people can earn back on cryptocurrencies. Now, typically, what companies would use is Bitcoin, Ethereum, but this time around, XRP is also included. So it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, or XRP that essentially people can redeem their points in. People can redeem for miles, like for example, in like American Express, when you can redeem it for miles, airline miles. Or in this case, they could go for XRP. Once again, Japan is, standing firm for XRP. SBI Trade is also the one that's leading this situation, essentially with this partnership. Incredible to see, once again, XRP on that strong foundation. Also, that was the last news of tonight's live. So, on that note, we have come to the endings of tonight's live. And in tonight's live, we talked about essentially Ripple, XRP, and SBI Holdings and their reward system. We talked about tonight's live regarding Bit Digital shifting their Bitcoin holdings to Ethereum. We talked about tokenized gold essentially breaking the milestone and bringing in more inflows of liquidity compared to traditional gold ETFs. Tokenization gold is actually doing better. We talked about Grayscale rebalancing their crypto funds and adding Cardano and Ondo Finance and dropping Polkadots. We talked about Trump Media Truth Social filing for a cryptocurrency ETF, and it includes XRP in the crypto basket. We also talked about tonight's live regarding Metaplanet setting a very bold plan to buy digital bank. We went through news regarding Tether revealing 5% of its token supply, which is held in a Swiss vault and is held in gold. We also went through news on tonight's live regarding Reserve One, a company that's about to go public, launching a basket of cryptocurrencies with $1 billion of a budget. We also went through news on tonight's live regarding the matters of Japan making a very big mistake when it comes to the negotiations in Washington regarding the tariff situations. And we also essentially talked about tonight's live regarding Donald Trump's bold demands of removing Jerome Powell once again as the Fed chairman. And we went through news regarding US senators proposing targeting the leader of essentially El Salvador. We also went through news regarding Hong Kong stablecoin ordinance set for August launch. And we went through news on tonight's live regarding BlackRock's iShare Bitcoin ETF surpassing 700,000 Bitcoins, which is tremendous. And the last news we went through on tonight's live regarding Trump's new tariff stirs, but it hasn't impacted the crypto space in a negative way. So those are all the things that we talked about on tonight's live. If you're watching this for the first time ever, this is called the CMF Live. It stands for Crypto Mouse Family, and you can tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time. Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time. And this was episode 329 of the CMF Live. You tune this episode where I share the most recent news regarding cryptocurrencies, CBDCs, AI, politics, and regulations. So if you ever want to be updated on any of those topics, tune into this live Monday to Friday, 10 p.m. London time onwards. And tune in for episode 330 tomorrow. Let's go to the comment section, obviously, before we do leave. This is what's happening over there. And then we'll call it a night. Japan is ahead of the curve, Miles. I agree, 100%. Let's go in. Hello, Miles. When will alts get their bull run since 2000? Actually, there's one more comment. Okay, there's comments above. Carl, please have your opinion about NFTs and which type of NFT is good to have in our portfolio? None. NFTs were mostly used for money laundering purposes only, to be fairly honest. So none. I wouldn't recommend any NFTs. Stay away from NFTs, preferably. Hello, Miles. When will alts get obviously not financial advice in any sort of way, but NFTs, for me, I would stay away from them. Hello, Miles. When will alts get a bull run since 2024 March? They've been going down so bad to the point where back to 2022 bear market levels. We're not back to those levels in any sort of a way. However, it's only due to the geopolitical tensions and tariff situations. But once this blows over, and the tariff situations now actually didn't impact the market space in a negative way. The market has already priced in that scenario happening for once in its life. But we're getting very close to the stage of regulations. This month in particular is all about regulations, especially the White House report that's coming out, or the crypto week of regulations we're going to be having announced by Trump. So we're at the stage of a Genius Act being passed, a Clarity Act being passed, and there's a banking situation being passed in terms of regulations, which all equals to utilities. So just hold on tight. We're not that far off from that absolute mega blast. Japan is ahead of the curve, Miles. I agree 100%. Ian, do you do lives early now? Yes, Cass, I do. 10 p.m. London time from now on. Thanks, Miles. Have a good night. Let's go, Christopher. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thanks again for another brilliant live stream. Much appreciated. Let's go, Thompson. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thank you, Miles and CMF. See you all tomorrow. Take care and stay safe. Let's go, Mike. See you tomorrow, brother, same time as usual. Night and thank you. Let's go, Susie. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thompson. See you tomorrow, brother, same time as usual as well. Susie, see you tomorrow. Adi, good night, Miles. Thanks for another great live, mate. Let's go, Adi. See you tomorrow, same time as usual, mate. Great live. Thank you, Miles. Good night, Miles and CMF. Jason, see you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Great insight, as always. Thanks, Miles. All positive news. Once again, let's go, CMF. Let's go, Shelly. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Thanks, Miles. Good night, everyone. See you tomorrow. Orphan, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Mike, see you tomorrow, brother, same time as usual. Good night, Miles and CMF. Thanks for great news. I'll see you tomorrow. Free and forever. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Ian, good night, Miles and family. Brilliant live. Many thanks. See you all. See you all tomorrow. Ian, see you tomorrow, same time as usual, brother. Good night, good night, Miles and CMF. Leave. See you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. Good night, Miles, and thank you for another great show. Let's go, Funky Brother. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Respect, Miles. Love it. NFTs. Let's go, Ian. Regs and utility only. Exactly, Davey. Let's go. Regulations and utilities, all that matters, not NFTs. Don't worry about NFTs. Regulations and utility, that's all that matters. Thanks, Miles. It was good to be back at your live show. Thanks so much, brother, for your hard work. Be blessed, my friend. Good night, CMF family, and see you next time. It's time to turn off my CMF TV. Let's go, Carl. See you tomorrow, same time as usual. Good night, Miles. Callie, see you tomorrow, same time as usual. Thank you for blessing us with your knowledge, Miles, and have a lovely night. Oh, Lena, see you tomorrow, same time as usual as well. I will be seeing everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual, for the CMF Live at 10 p.m. London time, as always, for episode 330. If you liked and retweeted this live and you're watching this on X, thank you so much to everybody from the CMF who liked and retweeted this live and put a comment outside the live, hashtagging anything you want. And thank you so much to everyone on YouTube who's watching right now who's also liked the live. And thanks so much to everyone who subscribed and followed me during this live. See everybody tomorrow, same timing as usual. Everybody have a great day or a good night, depending on where you're around the world. CMF, see you all tomorrow, same time as usual, for episode 330 of the CMF Live. And the disclaimer of this live has always been not financial advice, not political advice, and whatever I say is only for entertainment purposes. See everybody tomorrow for episode 330 of the CMF Live.